We exiled your kind to die. You have no future here. You were wrong about us. Welcome to our empire. Ambassador Kale Varin of the Human Sovereign Territories had traveled to the arid desert world of Thessalar specifically because the Galactic Concordat had asked him to come, and he had agreed specifically because he had things to say that were better delivered in person. The two arid diplomatic enforcers who had met his shuttle on the landing field, Commander Lion and her sister Officer Vane, both in the full silver and gold armor of the Concordat's Diplomatic Enforcement Corps, had not expected him to arrive alone. The 4 soldiers behind them had not expected his ship to be the size it was. And none of them had expected his expression to be the one it was, which was the expression of someone who had already decided how this conversation was going to go and was content to let the other party discover that in their own time. Lion raised her armored finger and pointed it directly at him, which was the errand version of an accusation being formally delivered. You are in violation of the exile protocol, she said. The human sovereign territories occupy 9 systems beyond the dead zone boundary. The Concordat has catalogued your expansion and declares it in breach of the 200-year agreement. Kale Varin looked at her finger, then at her. The agreement, he said, exiled humanity to the dead zone. It did not prohibit us from expanding beyond it once we had established ourselves there. The spirit of the agreement, he said pleasantly, was that humanity would cease to be a problem. We understand that. We understood it 200 years ago, too. He looked at the ship behind him, not the shuttle, which was only a shuttle, but the vessel visible above the desert horizon, the one that had not landed because it was too large to land here comfortably. The problem with exile, he continued, is that it assumes the exiled party runs out of options. We didn't. This was, in the considerable understatement tradition of human diplomatic communication, accurate. The dead zone had been called that for a reason. It was a region of space that the Concordat surveys had assessed as containing no usable resources, no habitable worlds, and no infrastructure from which a species could realistically build anything. The assessment had been correct in the sense that none of those things existed there in a form the Concordat knew how to use. Humans, it turned out, were good at finding things in unexpected places. The first breakthrough had been the mineral deposits in the dead zone's outer asteroid fields, compositions the Concordat survey equipment had marked as inert, but which human metallurgical analysis had identified as containing alloys that, under the right processing conditions, produced materials stronger and lighter than anything in the Concordat's standard construction catalog. The second breakthrough had been the atmospheric chemistry of the dead zone's one planet, which was not habitable by Concordat species standards but which had conditions that human agriculture, adapted for exactly this kind of adversity over 10,000 years of farming difficult land, had managed to turn productive within 30 years. The third breakthrough had been the humans themselves. 200 years of exile produced a specific kind of human, not beaten, not reduced, not the species the Concordat had assessed as manageable. 200 years of exile produced the kind of species that had nothing to lose, everything to build, and the particular combination of stubbornness and creativity that had always been humanity's defining feature and which adversity had, rather than diminishing, concentrated. By the end of the 1st century, the human sovereign territories had 12 functional stations. By the end of the 2nd century, they had 9 inhabited systems and a fleet that the Concordat's intelligence division had spent 3 years trying to accurately count and had concluded was larger than their initial estimates by a factor they did not want to publish. Kale Varin looked at Lion's pointing finger and thought about all of this. The Concordat, he said, exiled humanity because it considered us a threat. This was, I want to be clear, not entirely wrong. We can be quite threatening when motivated. He paused. The error was in the method. Exile didn't reduce the threat. It removed all the incentives we had to be cooperative. You will withdraw from the 9 systems, Lion said. Her finger had not moved. Her expression had not changed. The Concordat will not accept this. The Concordat, Kale said, will accept what is in front of it, which is 200 years of work that produced something your surveys told you the dead zone couldn't support. He looked at the spacecraft above the horizon. We are not here to negotiate withdrawal. We are here because the Concordat requested this meeting, and we attended it because we are willing to discuss the terms of reintegration into the galactic community. He paused. On our terms, not the exile protocols. Lion's finger lowered slightly, the specific millimeters of someone receiving information that was changing their calculation without admitting the change. You're proposing reintegration, she said. I'm proposing a conversation about reintegration, he said. There's a difference. One implies we're asking. The other implies we're deciding whether to offer. He looked at her steadily. We're not asking. Vane, the sister officer who had maintained precise silence since the introduction, said something to Lion in Aaron that Kale's translator rendered approximately as, the fleet count was accurate. Lion's expression did not change visibly, but something in her posture did, the specific adjustment of someone who had reweighed a situation and was managing the reweighing professionally. What are your terms? She said. Kale Varin looked at the desert around him, at the 4 soldiers, at the ship above the horizon that the Concordat's intelligence division had not accurately counted, at the 2 Aaron diplomatic enforcers who had come to tell him he was in violation of an exile protocol that had been designed to end humanity 200 years ago. Full recognition of the human sovereign territories, he said. Concordat membership on equal footing. Trade access. And he paused because this was the one that was going to land differently than the others. An acknowledgement in the formal record of what the exile was for and why it didn't work. You want an apology, Lion said. I want accuracy, he said. Apology is optional. Accuracy is.